She was in the hospital for quite a while, and she was just kind of lying in bed thinking to herself, why in the world would a loving God do something like this to me? I have nothing now. I can't ride horses. I can't paint anymore. She has no feeling or function from her neck down.
Which I would think any normal person, that would be the first thing that goes through your mind, like, why God?
Exactly. Why God? And what use am I now? So she sank very quickly into depression, and some really great friends came around her and said, Joni, God permits that which he hates to accomplish that which he loves. God takes no pleasure in her spinal cord injury, but he loved what he was going to be doing through her and with it to inspire what ended up being millions of people who are affected by disability. So she created this ministry, Joni and Friends, International. And the home office is in Los Angeles, California, but there are area ministries throughout the United States and throughout the world. And we do, like I said, our main goal is to equip churches on how to effectively evangelize and disciple people affected by disability. But we do various other programs like respite events for families. We do a week-long family retreat up at Wonder Valley for families affected by disability. We do a walk and roll outreach. This year it's going to be at the zoo, which is awesome. So it's just kind of raising awareness for the Central Valley Ministry. We do a disability summit. So this last year we had Dr. Eric Carter from Vanderbilt University, who's well known in disability communities, come and just kind of help better train up disability leaders in the Central Valley on how to better be reaching families. So we do various programs throughout the year, but our main focus is church training.
Gotcha. And so you said something that I'm still caught up on, and I've heard Joni say it, and you said it really fast.
Oh.
I want to go back to that for a second. God, what was it? God permits
that which he hates to accomplish that which he loves.
God permits that which he hates to accomplish that which he loves. That's a powerful thought if you think about that.
Absolutely.
And when you think about things that have happened in your life that were hard, God didn't necessarily stricken you with those things. And a lot of people think that, your parents got divorced and you think, the typical child thinks, what did I do? Right? Or you get fired from a job, or you get a divorce, or something bad happens in your life. What did I do to deserve this? Well, God hates those things. He doesn't want us to go through pain.
Correct.
But he permits it in order to what?
To accomplish that which he loves.
To accomplish that which he loves.
Yeah.
So here's this woman that's lost function of most of her body.
Yeah.
But has been able to affect the whole world.
Exactly.
Which she wouldn't have been able to do with limbs, most probably.
And what Joni would say, she has an entire movie dedicated to her about her life. If you ever go check it out, it's just called the Joni movie. But in that movie, she explains in depth that she wouldn't trade the intimacy she has with God. She wouldn't trade the nearness, the closeness, the character change that occurred in her. She wouldn't trade it for any amount of walking. As much as she thought that she had lost everything, she really gained so much more through that experience.
Yeah, that's super cool. So, I have a good friend. His name's Mario, and Mario is quadriplegic as well. He dove into the shallow end of a pool and broke his neck, and had a similar, went into depression, did that whole thing, and last year, Mario just finished his first book. It's a graphic novel on the life of Paul. And it's so cool to see a guy that really was questioning God and why things would happen and why that would happen to his life, to now he's written this incredible book, and it's a deep theological book, but it's also it's a graphic novel, so like my kids can read it, and they're reading the story of Paul, but it's so deep and so biblical at the same time. And to see how God took what he hated, Mario's accident, his injury, and turned it into something so beautiful. And he's such a awesome guy now. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very, very cool. So coming back, I want to talk about what you do for Joni and Friends
Sure.
and how you got there, because you have an interesting story yourself,
Yeah.
how you got there. This is the Shawn Beaty Show, and I want to plug a couple things with Clovis Hills. First of all, I'm the senior pastor at Clovis Hills Community Church. Lauren is part of our Tandem Ministry, which is a ministry to people with disabilities. And we have services every Sunday, Saturday and Sunday. Saturday night, 6 o'clock. Sundays at 9 and 10:40. We have services for everyone from birth all the way to 100 years old, and it's a really cool congregation. We also have a service that meets in Spanish, so if you know people that speak Espanol, you can do that. We have an awesome Spanish service. We have English services. We have children's services. We have youth services. It's an incredible place. So Saturday night, 6 o'clock, 9 and 10:40 on Sundays. And this is the Shawn Beaty Show, and we'll be back in a few minutes. CentralValleyTalk.com. All right, hey, we're back with the Shawn Beaty Show, and hey, just a couple things I want to remind you. Coming up at Clovis Hills, we have Father's Day, which is not this Sunday, but the following Sunday on June 12th. I don't even remember when Father's Day. Whenever Father's Day is. Not this Sunday, which is the 12th, so it's the following Sunday, 7 days later, June 19th. So there you go. That's Father's Day. I encourage you to come. We have a lot of fun at our Father's Day service. We have out back in between services, we have archery. You can throw hatchets, tomahawk throwing. We have go-karts. All the dads are getting a bottle of Dad's root beer on Sunday. It's just, we have a lot of fun at it. We call it Man Day. And it's a lot of fun. You can bring your husband, your father, your boyfriend, whatever. Bring men. It's a good time that day. So I've got Lauren Annin here, and she works for Joni and Friends in the Central Valley. And she also leads a pretty significant ministry at Clovis Hills called Tandem. And Lauren, tell us about what you actually do at Joni and Friends. You've shared what Joni and Friends does.
Yes.
They resource churches to help reach people with disabilities. What do you do?
Yes, so my specific position is called Program Manager, and I manage programs, if you can believe it. I am basically responsible for coordinating any sort of event or outreach that Joni and Friends does. So I'm responsible for the Joni and Friends Family Retreat that happens once a year. I'm responsible for our Walk and Roll outreach event. I'm responsible for all of the respites that take place around the valley.
What is a respite? Explain to them what a respite is.
So respites are 3 to 4 hours where we train volunteers on how to work with kids affected by disability. And by work, I mean play. It's basically 3 to 4 hours where the parents are kind of gifted a time of respite. So they drop off their kiddos with us. Volunteers are paired one-on-one or buddied with the kids with disability as well as their siblings. Their siblings each get a buddy also. Frequently we see that the siblings of children with disabilities don't always get the chance to just be kids. They're often asked to be an extra adult in the home. And so when they come to respite, they get a buddy too who just gets to do whatever they want to do. They don't have to take care of their sibling. They don't have to help get groceries. They don't have to do anything like that. They get to just be a kid for that time.
I never even thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And then mom and dad actually get some time.
Mom and dad get some time.
When I'm assuming when you have a kid with a disability, especially like a tougher one.
Yeah.
Like you can't just call a babysitter and go, hey, let's go to dinner.
No. Yeah. No, you don't just call up a babysitter. You don't just go to a daycare. You don't. Sometimes we've had parents show up with their 13-year-old, and it's the very first time in that child's 13 years of life that that parent has left that child with anybody ever.
Oh my gosh.
And so, and they're going on a date for their first time in their 13 years of marriage since having that child. Wow. And so it offers parents 3 to 4 hours. Some parents use it as a date time. Some parents use it as their grocery shopping for the month. Some parents use it to just go take a nap. And it's their time to do whatever they want. So I organize those, and what we do is we try to get churches around the valley to offer up their buildings for that time. So we have different rooms for playrooms and craft rooms and playgrounds and things like that. And then to allow us to recruit 10, 15, 20 volunteers to be the buddies for that time. So we do that once a month. at various churches around the valley. So
Okay.
I organized that at Joni and Friends.
Gotcha. And then, and you said the rock and roll, and is that a fundraiser?
Yeah, the walk and roll is a fundraiser, but it also is kind of our opportunity to get out into the valley and raise some awareness. So, for example, this year we're going to be walking around the entirety of Roding Park and then entering the zoo with like big bright shirts on that say Joni and Friends Walk and Roll, and people will
cool.
have flyers and things like that. So it is our fundraiser for us, but it's also a big awareness outreach for us also.
Gotcha. So that's super cool. So you guys are doing that. You have a retreat at Wonder Valley, right?
Yes.
And I've heard that is very magical.
It is.
Like you have amazing stories from there. And
Absolutely.
tell us a little bit about that retreat and just some of the stuff you see that come out of it.
Yeah, so Wonder Valley Family Retreat happens every year at Wonder Valley over spring break. And what it is camp for families affected by disability. So the whole family gets to come up to camp. And again, like we were saying before about, you can't just call a babysitter. These families don't just go to Disneyland. They don't even just go to Blackbeard's. They don't just go to the playground sometimes. And so what this retreat offers is a fully accessible family retreat camp environment for all members of the family. So every single child with a disability is paired one-on-one with a buddy for the entire week. And there's programming for both the siblings as well as the kids with disabilities and the parents. So we provide a camp pastor, and the parents have just their time, and they split into men and women's groups, and they have time to just relax and be by themselves while their kid is off doing zip line, go-karts, boating, hiking, horseback riding, etc. with their buddy.
So it's literally a retreat for the parents, because
Yes.
I know I have 3 typical kids.
Right, and you want a retreat.
And yeah, when you have kids, you don't go on vacation.
No.
You take trips.
Yeah.
Because it's just as much work to go somewhere with your kids.
Right.
And I can imagine if you have a kid with a disability,
Oh, yeah.
especially a strong disability, man, to have a week where you can just like not have to worry about that sometimes has got to be an incredible vacation for them.
Yes. And we've had parents describe it literally like, this must be what heaven feels like. Because another thing that happens at retreat is they don't just get access to all of these things, they get access to a community that is truly embracing of their child.
Wow.
Nobody looks at their child with Down syndrome funny, and nobody freaks out when their kid with autism has a meltdown, or that their kid with cerebral palsy needs help getting from point A to point B. Nobody thinks that that's strange or awkward or out of the normal at family retreat. Everybody has that experience at retreat. So your experience is not much different. It's very normal at retreat. So parents say, like, this has to be what heaven feels like, a community where my child doesn't look different than anybody else.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
So you do all that, you coordinate the events, you do those things.
Yes.
So you didn't set out in life to do this.
No,
This isn't something that someone goes,
One day when I grow up.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you get there? Like what's going on? And we probably have to break in between this story, I'm sure.
No problem.
But let's just at least start it as we go.
Sure. So I went to a lot of school to become a school psychologist. So I did 7 years of school to become a school psychologist, graduated with a master's degree in that, and I was a psychologist in Sanger Unified for 5 years. Loved it. I loved the kids that I worked with. I loved the teachers that I worked with. Everything about it was amazing. But there was always kind of this sense of discontentment. And again, not because I was unhappy or, anything like that, or hated my job. I know that everybody kind of hates their job on some days. Like some days are worse than others. But
even
this guy.
Even I. Just letting
time.
you know, there's times. Some of you in the church, love
when you fill out those communication cards.
Let me tell you. Okay, sorry.
So,
how'd you go there?
There are times when everybody hates their job, but I feel like at the end of the day, you should be able to say, but I feel like I'm doing what the Lord would have me do.
Yeah.
And I never felt that way. As a school psychologist, I never felt that. And in year about 4 of me being a school psychologist, I was sitting at my computer typing maybe my 600th IEP. I was typing it, and it is the last time, it was the first time, and since then, the last time I ever really truly felt I heard the voice of God. And it said something to the effect of, why aren't these kids at church? And I knew exactly what it meant. It meant I work with kids with disabilities every single day of my life. I write about them when I go home. I think about them over the weekend. And then I would walk into church and not a single kid with an obvious disability existed. And that didn't make sense to me. How is that even possible that hundreds of kids are in these schools that I work in, but not in the church that I knew of anyway? And so that prompted me to speak with a friend of mine who had adult siblings with Down syndrome, and I knew that they were super involved in their church in their hometown. So I reached out to him, and he said, you should check out Joni and Friends. I was like, who? The what? So I Googled it, got in contact, and someone from our local office came and met me, and we discussed what it would look like to start a special needs ministry at the church. And Joni and Friends, at that time, I wasn't working there, but they came out to Clovis Hills and they trained me and they trained our volunteers. And
they even brought Joni Eareckson Tata.
They brought Joni Eareckson Tata
which was
to our
amazing
church.
that I got to meet her.
No big deal.
So cool. Yeah.
Not saying that'll happen for your church, but you know.
But anyways.
So yeah, they came out, trained us up, got the ball rolling. And it's kind of that if you build it, they will come mentality, because parents affected by disability are hungry for a place to call home, hungry for a place of belonging and true community. And I just started calling families whom the children's volunteers at the time said, like, well, maybe you should check out this kid. He could maybe use a buddy. And it wasn't like a strong need, like he didn't have an obvious disability, but I would call the parents and they'd say, oh yeah, actually he really struggles with this. We would love for him to have a buddy. We started with one kid, and within a year we were serving 23 families affected by disability.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it just kind of spread like wildfire. Like, there is a place where you belong and can call home and will accept you, and you won't get called out of church every service, and you won't be told we can't handle your kid, and so cool. You won't be told, that you can't come back. And so it spread amazingly. And then that next year, working closely with Joni and Friends, I started kind of volunteering with them in my spare time. And they invited my husband, John, and I to come be the leaders at their retreat that year. So John and I went and led the high school group. And it was amazing and wonderful and magical. And
I'm going to pause there, though, because we're up on a break.
And on the magical note.
We'll
come back to more magic.
We'll get back to it. This is the Shawn Beaty Show. We're going to watch these commercials, and we'll get back. Hey, want to plug a couple things going on at Clovis Hills. Obviously, we got Father's Day coming up in 2 weeks. June 22nd, we have a Mighty Men's Breakfast that's done at Clovis Hills. It's actually all the churches in the valley. Their men's ministry are coming together to serve one another or to have breakfast together. And then also, June 12th, we start a VBS, a Vacation Bible School for Kids. It's going to be awesome. Lauren's husband, John, is actually our children's pastor, and he's probably going crazy right now.
Absolutely insane.
Yes, so it's June 12th. It's free this year. This is the first year we've made it free because we just want to see as many kids as possible at it. So I'd encourage you to bring your kids to it. It's going to be great. And I know there's our demographic for this show is actually 6 to 12 years old.
Oh.
That's only the people that watch this. So kids. I'm kidding. There's no kids watching this. Parents.
But those parents who are watching, we also need volunteers.
That's right. If you go to Clovis Hills Community Church, and we could background check you, we'd like you to be a volunteer for the...
I can't emphasize how badly we need volunteers.
Yes. So, and I'll be serving myself even. So, that's going on. So you were talking about your story and how you came to work at Joni and Friends, school psychologist, met with Joni and Friends and started a disabilities ministry at the church.
At our church,
serving, we serve right now about 25 families in the church, and it's an amazing ministry. If you're a pastor, I'm telling you, it's an unreached people group in your community that you could reach, that no other churches are reaching right now, and you could step in and do that. And we'll talk later about how to do that.
Absolutely.
But so you went with your husband to the retreat at Wonder Valley, and it was magical.
Magical.
Right? So tell us about it.
We served as the high school leaders. So we had a group of about 20 teens affected by disability as well as their buddies in our group. And it was it's life-changing. If you, again, ever think about serving for a week or we call it a short-term missions trip for those who attend, and it's local, it's not very far away, it'll change your life. It'll change your perspective on what disability is and means and could mean for your life. So at that retreat, John and I had been talking for a couple of years about my discontentment with my job as a school psychologist. And he said, well, wouldn't it be cool if you worked for Joni and Friends? And I was like, well, yeah, it'd be cool, but who in the world would give up this job? And at the time, they had a fully staffed office. There are 4 positions in that office, and they were fully staffed and had been for a while that I knew of, And I was like, that would be the coolest job maybe in the universe, but there's no way anyone would just kind of up and leave working there. It's like a dream, And 2 weeks after retreat, we got a phone call that a position had opened up at Joni and Friends, and if I would consider applying. And I hung up from that and said, what are you doing to me, Lord? Because I had a great job as a school psychologist. I had worked really hard to get that master's degree. It was a great paying job.
Stable, all that.
Stable. I was making great money. If I took the job at Joni and Friends, John and I would together make what I was making by myself. And I grew up in a not very wealthy family, and so that stability for me meant comfort, meant we were all going to be okay. And John, if anybody knows John, he's just one of the most remarkable people in the universe. He said there's no paycheck that you could be receiving that could replace knowing you're doing what the Lord asked you to do. Wow. And he said, we'll be fine. We'll make it. We'll live. We'll figure it out. And so, then the next week I put in my letter of resignation and went to work for Joni and Friends. And it has been magical.
Wow. Yeah, that's super cool. So while you work for Joni and Friends and you do coordinate events and things like that there, you also lead, as a volunteer, a ministry at Clovis Hills called Tandem.
Yes.
And that's kind of the buddy ministry that we have for children with disabilities.
Yes.
So talk about that. What does that look like on a typical Sunday? And what kind of kids is the Tandem Ministry servicing?
Yeah. We serve any child affected by disability. So from kids who have kind of severe ADHD who need that extra person to keep them on track all the time. I do kind of want to make a distinction. We do not serve kids who just kind of have behavioral challenges, right? So there's a major difference for us when it's a kid who just needs some extra behavioral support, because we can provide that at Clovis Hills no problem without that extra one-on-one buddy. All the way to kids who have severe cerebral palsy or Down syndrome or even low-functioning autism. I know there's a lot of parents who have kids with low-functioning autism who are thinking, there's no way my kid could ever come to church. There is absolutely a way that your kid could come to church. So we serve any child affected by disability. And what we do is I train our buddies on how to work with all those various disabilities. So I provide the training on, good behavioral interventions, how to speak, how to act, how to move, what to do, all of that sort of thing. But the thing I emphasize most in my training is a lot of people think that you need this big background to work with kids affected by disability. You need to have been a school psychologist or work in special education. We have anywhere from 30 to 35 volunteers on our team. Maybe 4 or 5 of them have any sort of special needs background at all. You do not need any sort of, you need a lot of love and a lot of compassion and a lot of flexibility. If you have those 3 things, you are a special needs ministry volunteer.
Yeah.
And so on a Sunday morning, well, if let's say you were a kid who was the very first time, I create student information sheets for each of our kids. So I talk with the parents about what works best for your kid. What do they really like? What do they really not like? If they're having a meltdown, what can we do? Because we're not calling you out of your church. Unless your kid is broken, bleeding, or missing, I will not call a parent out of church. And sometimes not even then. Sometimes I'm like, we'll figure it out. Because we know that those kids might have some trouble. We know that, so I'm not going to call you.
You've trained your people. They understand
They
how
know.
it works.
Yeah, exactly. So They read up on their student information sheet, and they buddy with that child and accommodate for them during the service, help keep them included. We don't have a special classroom just for our kids with special needs. They are fully integrated
So
into
why is
our
that?
other programs.
Why is that?
That is more a personal preference. There are other churches in the Valley who do have a classroom just for special needs kids, and that is not wrong at all. I don't have any... that it's more my personal preference to see complete integration and inclusion. For me, it's more, like I said, just more a preference for me. I prefer to see kids who are typically developing kids exposed and learning with and loving on kids affected by disability. I like seeing the classrooms get a little shaken up sometimes. I
think I know why all this is. So we're gonna take a little side trail here.
Yes.
So how old were you when you started coming to Clovis Hills?
I was 17.
17. Is that where you became a Christian? At
A
Clovis
few
Hills?
years later, but at Clovis Hills. Yes.
Yeah, at Clovis Hills. So one of the values at Clovis Hills that we have is something called open acceptance.
Yes.
That we don't care where you've been, we care where you're going. And what happens is it creates an environment that is just very accepting of everyone.
Yeah.
And that just kind of bleeds into people, especially if you came to Christ at Clovis Hills, you were discipled at Clovis Hills.
Yes.
It's just part of who you are.
It becomes
so
part of your
full
DNA.
integration means that's how it is. When we started our Spanish service, right away we fully integrated the children right into our children's program. And it's a beautiful picture of the kingdom.
Absolutely.
Is really what it is. Not to say it's bad to have your own class or, and like the Spanish service has its own service because of language barriers and things like that. But there is something, I think you naturally went towards that because of that value of open acceptance.
Yeah, that would make a ton of sense. And it's worked beautifully at Clovis Hills. I mean, you should see if you walk into the pier, second service on any given Sunday, you will see a group of about 3 or 4 fourth, fifth, and sixth graders who immediately run and greet one of our little girls with cerebral palsy who's in a wheelchair. She's completely nonverbal, but they speak her love language. And they didn't know her a year ago, and they run up to her and throw their hands in there. They're so excited to see her, and they wheel her to the front of the room and help raise her hands for worship. And that just wouldn't have happened at their school had they not met her at Clovis Hills. And so it totally changes who these kids know and love outside of church.
Yeah. My daughter is in an incredible program called Break the Barriers.
Absolutely.
And part of her job on her gymnastics team is she rolls a girl with cerebral palsy, and she does tricks on her wheelchair with her, and it's so cool to see that kind of integration.
Absolutely.
And it's a picture of the kingdom.
Yeah.
So we're gonna take a minute to break. I want to announce it. I want to give you a couple things before we run to our break. First and foremost, again, our VBS starts June 12th. Again, Clovis Hills Community Church, our services are Saturday nights, 6 o'clock, Sundays at 9 and 10:40. We also offer a Spanish service at 10:40 as well. We have English at all 3, and the Spanish, there's a separate Spanish service at 10:40 as well. I encourage you to check it out, www.clovishills.com. We'd love to see you. We're going to hit the break, and we'll be right back. All right, hey, we're back with the Shawn Beaty Show and Clovis Hills Community Church. Want to remind you, coming up is our Father's Day service, and you want to come to that. It's gonna be awesome. We got bow and arrows, archery, tomahawk throwing, go-karts, all kinds of stuff for dads. We call it Man Day. So any man would enjoy it, and a lot of women enjoy it too. It's a lot of fun.
Do the women get to do all that?
The women get to do all that too.
I'm
yeah.
there.
Yeah, you can throw a hatchet, all that stuff.
Done.
It's a blast. It's put on by our men's ministry. We have an awesome men's ministry at Clovis Hills. Do some incredible things. So we were talking though about the Tandem Ministry, and we're talking about kind of how it works and what it does. But there's a deep-seated why behind it. And it's based out of Scripture and a lot of it from the New Testament.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the why behind the Tandem Ministry.
Yeah. So when I kind of first started on this journey, I got asked that question a lot. Like, well, why? Why would you even need to have a ministry for people affected by disability? Or now that I'm experiencing life with other churches, I hear all just some of the most normal yet seemingly crazy things, like, well, we don't have anybody affected by disability in our church. Well, why is that? If 20% of Fresno, 1 in every 5 homes, is listed as having someone affected by disability, is 20% of your church affected by disability in some way? And that stems out of a lot of traditional kind of Christian theories about why people have disabilities. And a lot of those are infused with something called the medical model. And that just kind of assumes that disability is a deficit or a lack of capacity that requires either correction or stabilization. And so what you hear in the church sometimes is that disability is caused or created by some sort of sin issue in that person's life or a punishment from God. It suggests that there's some sort of link between healing and forgiveness of sin. And clearly, a lot of us are saying, like, really,
that's
right
crazy.
Now it seems crazy, but you hear it more often than not. It's probably the most frequently. A lot of people affected by disability have walked into churches and immediately were laid hands on them, trying to heal or take away this disability, or ask, what is the sin issue in your life?
And they're well-meaning, right? Because they read the New Testament, they saw Jesus did it,
exactly,
and occasionally even Peter did it,
exactly,
and maybe Paul did it,
exactly. But the problem with all of those biblical accounts is that the primary function of those stories is to reveal the identity of Jesus. None of them focus on the disability itself, and none of them suggest a correlation between sin and healing.
As a matter of fact, Jesus spoke against that
exactly.
Every time. This man's parents did not sin. This is going to happen because of to bring glory to Christ.
To God. Yeah, exactly. The other thing that sort of the Christian world has unfortunately adopted into thinking is that disability is sort of trivialized to meet some sort of beneficial end. So there's this thought that people affected by disability are almost sometimes glorified, like they have been blessed with this thing so that we all have something to offer. So they become kind of avenues for other people's charity, if that makes sense. So they have very little to offer themselves, but they sort of cultivate love and generosity in other people, if that makes sense. Like, well, this person in a wheelchair can't really do anything, but look at what a wonderful person I am by gifting them with money or my friendship or something like that.
Makes them feel good about themselves to serve someone with a disability.
Exactly, but the problem again with that is that the focus is shifted away from the person affected by disability and onto the non-disabled benefactor.
And again, it's well-meaning.
Exactly.
And most people don't even know they're doing it.
Exactly.
I find it interesting, too, because at the heart of Christianity, historical Christianity, the reason we have Braille today, the reason we have wheelchairs or handicap ramps or handicap accessible anything, that none of that would be in our culture if it weren't for 1st and 2nd century Christianity. They were the very first humans on earth, really, to put value on someone with a disability and say that they had the same value to God as anyone else. And that was a brand new thought in human history.
Yeah.
It's funny how, as Christians, we've strayed from that.
Yes.
In a well-meaning way, but we've totally strayed from it. So sorry, I had to interject that kind of historical perspective.
Absolutely. And sort of the overarching problem with all of these thoughts, there's another one out there where people will say, we're all disabled. And that's partially true. That's a partial truth. You and I might not have a physical disability or an emotional disability or an intellectual disability, but we have a million spiritual disabilities.
Sure.
Or I have a million social disabilities. I'm not very good at socializing with other people. I have to think about it. Things like that. But while that is a partial truth, saying something like that or saying we're all on the same playing field really ignores realities of exclusion that are happening in the church. And there is exclusion happening in the church. About 75% of families here in the Central Valley have either been asked not to come back to church or been told that their child can't be handled or felt like they didn't belong at a church. Something like 90% of church-going special needs families would say that the most important thing that's currently missing from the church community is a welcoming attitude from the other people at their church. And all of those things sort of lead to a church-wide exclusion. A wonderful author named Thomas Reynolds, he wrote a book called Vulnerable Communion. I don't get anything for doing this, but I talk about Thomas Reynolds all the time. He is a fantastic author, has a son affected by disability. He wrote Vulnerable Communion, and he calls it the cult of normalcy. So people who are typically developing what we would define as normal people belong to something called the cult of normalcy. And what it is it's this social system of control where we are serving the purposes of those who fall within a recognizable standard range. And anyone who doesn't fit in that range, we either try to exclude or ignore, or we try to force you to look or feel or think more normally, like we do.
Sure. Again, well-meaning.
Well-meaning,
but
exactly.
Like, it's almost like we do it tacitly, like.
Exactly. Because there's this sense of feeling at home, he calls it hominess, with the people that you feel very comfortable with, people who look and think and talk and act like you.
Sure.
And so you feel very normal with them.
That's a sociological principle.
Exactly.
There's like a missiologist called Donald McGavran. He talks about the homogeneous unit principle.
Yes.
How in churches tend to look like everyone looks the same. Mm-hmm. So churches of different races, like that's why there's black church, that's why there's Hispanic church, that's why there's white church. Until you get to till at some point socioeconomics really define.
And like you said, it's well-meaning. There's another research group that focuses on in-group and out-group bias, which has to do with that. And we think a lot of times that in-groups do that, right? Like non-disabled churches, which are most churches or black churches or this churches or whatever, has to do with because they hate the out-group. But that's not true. What they're finding is that it's mostly because feelings like love and welcome and hospitality are simply reserved for those in the in-group. They choose to not give those to people who make them feel uncomfortable or vulnerable.
You don't know what to say.
Exactly.
For the longest time, like, I never knew how to greet someone with a disability.
Yeah.
I never knew, I would see, here's a great example. We have a deaf ministry at our church.
Yeah.
And I always, in the Spanish ministry, I'll go in and I'll try and speak Spanish. It's broken, but they appreciate it. And I was always afraid to go and speak to the people with hearing impairments, because I was afraid I was going to offend them.
Sure.
And I think this is good morning, and I'm afraid I'm going to say a bad word or something with my hands.
And so you choose to do nothing.
Yeah, so your nature is to avoid.
Right. To resist that sort of disorder, that feeling of vulnerability, because we've been taught our whole lives that feeling vulnerable is not a good feeling, that you should try to avoid feeling that way. You devote energy to rejecting the foreign and reaffirming the ordinary. And the problem with that, especially specific to disability ministry, is that all of those thoughts are in such disharmony with biblical concepts of love and welcome and hospitality.
Yeah.
I mean, we worship a Trinitarian God who is characterized by communion and interdependence, where each person in the family of God is an equal and indispensable member, Paul says, right? And he even takes it even further. Paul would suggest in 2 Corinthians that we require specifically those who seem to be weaker in our communities in order for our communities to be whole. And the problem is that we as people, right, who grew up in this century America, right, we tend to give time and attention to things that we've been taught are valuable or beautiful or worthy. We live in an economy of body capital, right? What can you give to me, or what can I get from you without giving very much of myself?
Yeah.
But Christ represented true beauty, which we struggle with. Dr. Kathy McReynolds, that's someone else you should look up. She said this beautiful thing, and I wrote it down so I didn't mess it up. She said, sin is a movement wherein a creature tries to exist for itself. And beauty, the way that Christ sees it, the way that we should try to see it, requires a radical decentering from yourself. And coming to terms with our views of people who are affected by disability can make you feel really vulnerable. It can be really unhoming, if you will.
Yeah.
It can make you feel very uncomfortable. But being vulnerable is precisely what God embraced in Christ on the cross, the absolute definition of a vulnerable God.
Christ hanging naked on a cross in public, is pretty stinking vulnerable,
Exactly.
right?
God
Okay.
is in solidarity with humanity at our most fundamental point, in weakness and brokenness and in vulnerability. And that should be something that we try to teach ourselves to embrace more, is feeling vulnerable with others and approaching people who seem to be weaker, right? As Paul would say, people affected by disability.
So let's pause there.
Yes, please.
So how do we do that? I can tell you how
Yes.
I do it, and I may do it wrong, so you can kind of guide me on this. I find for myself, because I believe all that,
Yes.
I have to embrace the awkwardness.
Yes.
Like, I feel awkward
Yes.
doing it. I'm afraid I'm going to offend,
Yes.
but I go anyways.
Right.
Right?
And that's exactly kind of the first step, right? Be willing to say hello, right?
Yeah.
Be willing to, and this is what in my volunteer trainings is one of the things I kind of try to hammer home with our disability ministry team. I want us to try to change our thinking, right? To when a kid with autism walks into the room, I want everybody's first thought to not be, holy crap, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
But instead to think the very first thought, what is the value that has been added to this room, right? What is so much more wonderful now that this kid is here than what was missing when he wasn't here, right?
Yeah.
And there's always something.
Yeah, the child has added diversity.
Exactly.
Those kind of things. And I think
Helping
that,
teach us flexibility, helping teach him more about, how to for him to be more flexible,
Yeah.
right? We all have something to
what
give
we
and
can
take.
teach him. I think there's something to it. Like at Clovis Hills, one of the values we have in our children's ministry is that every kid is known by name.
Yes.
If you think about it. So when that kid with autism comes in, or the kid comes in with cerebral palsy,
Yeah.
Typically they're known as the kid with autism or the
Right.
kid in the chair.
Right.
And when you say, Kevin, how are you? And Kevin can't even speak back to you, and you
Yeah.
know Kevin's not going to speak back to you.
Yeah.
There's still something powerful
Absolutely.
about
Absolutely.
that. Learning the kid's name could be the first step.
We had a mom who attends our church. She has a daughter affected by disability, and she actually posted that on Facebook that someone random from the church approached her in public and called her child by name. And she posted, like, well done, Clovis Hills. You achieved your mission. My child affected by disability who has never had that happen in her entire life. It happened at that church out in
Oh,
public.
man. Why did we leave
And
this for the
so-
last segment? People are probably like tuned out by now, and this
Yeah.
is by far like the
Yeah.
most important part we need to get to.
And Joni and Friends kind of has this book series, Irresistible Church, and that's the very first book. It starts with hello. It starts with being able to kind of just embrace that vulnerability, embrace that awkwardness, and step out, look someone in the eye who is affected by disability, and say hello to them, right?
Yeah.
Realize that they have intrinsic value simply because they were loved into being by God,
Yeah.
not because of their body capital or because what they have to offer, but just being attuned to other people's intrinsic value.
So step into the awkwardness,
Step into the awkward.
smile, eye contact,
Yeah.
learn the name.
Learn their name.
You might do something stupid, but it's okay. They have as much grace as you do.
Yes.
And
I brought this, Joni and Friends. If you go to our website, we have this disability etiquette sheet for those of you who like lists. And it just talks about those things, like use people first language. Shawn's been doing a wonderful job of doing that this entire time. You wouldn't say that that's an autistic boy or that's a Down syndrome kid. You would say that's a boy with autism. He is first and foremost a little boy.
Yeah.
He also happens to have this thing called autism.
he's a child of God.
He's a child of God.
When we're in
exactly.
recovery, we teach people in our recovery program at Clovis Hills, they're not an alcoholic. They're not a drug addict. They are not codependent. They're a
Right.
grateful believer in Jesus who struggles with alcoholism.
Right.
Same thing. That
Right.
kid is a grateful believer in Jesus who has autism.
Yeah, we tend to do that with anything. Like when we talk about like the blind men from the Bible or this person, like he's no longer blind. Why do we still call him the blind man?
Yeah.
Like,
It's true.
He's moved on. So
Yeah.
he's a man, who happened to have this story. So we have also, and that's what Joni and Friends is. We want to come into your church and talk about sort of that theology piece. We want to talk more about disability etiquette, give you practical tips, train up your children's ministry volunteers. How can we embrace kids with autism? Talk to you about your curriculum, sort of the broad range of things like that.
And really resource the church.
Resource.
So I'm going to jump. We're going to jump to something totally well, it still has to do with that. We partnered with Joni and Friends and our sister church, North Point Church, which is another great church
Wonderful
in town.
church.
And
who also has a special needs ministry.
our two churches were started 1 year apart by the same church. Like, we come from the same. It's a cool story. But anyways, you guys did a prom for kids with disabilities, and I went to that. I served in it, and it was amazing. And do we have some pictures of that? An evening to treasure. Maybe you could tell about it, and we can throw some pictures up while you tell the story.
So an evening to treasure was actually started by a young girl named Tiana Freeland. She was kind of just doing it as her senior legacy project for Minarets High School, and it turned into this spectacular evening where kids who and we offered it for teens and young adults affected by disability. So some young adults who never got to go to their senior prom got to come. And we had business sponsors and church sponsors, and North Point offered up their campuses, which was wonderful. And we had hundreds of volunteers come. And these students got free hair, free makeup, free tuxes, free dresses, free limo rides, free photos, a walk down a red carpet, police escorts, people cheering for them, paparazzi
on the red
pictures.
Carpet. That was the coolest part, I thought. These kids getting out of limos, and there's paparazzi and red carpets, and they're treated like royalty.
They were treated like royalty because, again, we believe these are princes and princesses in the kingdom of God, and they were just given the all-star treatment. And each one was paired with a friend for the night, a buddy for the night, and they went in and danced and ate. Chick-fil-A provided all the food. It was an incredible prom event that just really lifted up these teens and young adults affected by disability and made them feel as special as we truly believe they are. Man. It was glorious.
So I got 2 minutes left, and I'm going to get on a soapbox for a minute.
Okay.
Here's the deal. Like, you're watching video of this happen right now, and you're seeing this go on. But you will never see this on CNN. You'll never see it on Fox News. You'll never see it on MSNBC, because that's not what the stories they show about the church. The only stories they'll show on those 24-hour news networks is when someone's gotten molested, when someone's stolen money, when someone's done something bad. But every day around the world, the local church is doing stuff like this and not looking for credit. So I just want to remind you, if you're watching, remember that. The local church really is the hope of the world. Not just Clovis Hills, not just North Point. There's 465 churches in the Fresno, Clovis area. And all those churches are doing amazing things that you'll never hear about. So when people criticize the church, I always talk about, like, that's the bride of Christ. Don't mess with Jesus' wife. That'll piss him off. She's flawed and she's broken and she's got some messed up people in it. And I'm a pastor. I'm a messed up guy leading one. Yeah. But it is the hope of the world. And I see stuff like this all over the world. When I went to Haiti, I've been in India, I've been in Africa, and where the disabled are cared for, is usually it's the churches doing it. Absolutely. It's the body of Christ doing it. So, Lauren, I am so glad you came on today. Thank you for being on.
Thank you for inviting me. I was honored. It was wonderful.
You were super smart. I already knew you were smart, and then you just dropped all that knowledge, and I was like,
my word.
So, awesome. Thank you so much. Again, what's the website they can check?
Yeah, so JoniandFriends.com/Central California. If you're looking to volunteer, if you're looking to donate, if you're looking to get involved, if you're looking to start something like this at your church, again, it takes way less than you think, right? You're not going to need a lot of money. You're not going to need a lot of time. You're not going to need a lot of experience. You're not going to need any of those things. We want to come and help. We want to come and equip you. But yeah, if you're interested in sponsoring something like the walk and roll or the prom event, we're always looking for people to donate to make those things happen.
Awesome. And again, this has been the Shawn Beaty Show, Clovis Hills Community Church. We'll see you Sunday. Go be the church.